The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, shattering the quiet routines of Earth's most sophisticated listening posts. At first, the technicians at SETI thought their equipment had malfunctioned. The signal was too strong, too clear, and far too structured to be natural. Within minutes, every radio telescope, satellite dish, and communications array on the planet locked onto the same overwhelming broadcast. Dr. Catherine Morrison was enjoying her morning coffee in her Stanford University office when her phone erupted with notifications. As she scrolled through the cascade of urgent messages, her hand froze mid-motion, coffee cup suspended between desk and lips. The preliminary analysis from her colleagues painted an impossible picture. An alien transmission, broadcasting simultaneously across every known communication frequency. Kate. Professor Chen burst through her office door without knocking, tablet in hand. Are you seeing this? The signal. It's everywhere. She nodded, already pulling up the data streams on her monitors. The pattern recognition algorithms are going crazy. This isn't random, James. This is language. The message itself began broadcasting across every screen, every television, and every radio on Earth exactly 3 hours later. The aliens, calling themselves the Eternal Empire, spoke in perfect English, their words precisely calculated to inspire terror and awe. Primitive species of Sol 3. The transmission began, the voice artificially modulated to sound both authoritative and inhuman. Your world has been monitored since your first radio broadcasts reached our listening posts. We are the Eternal Empire, rulers of 17 systems, masters of 12 species more advanced than yours. Your technological progress has been deemed sufficient for integration into our domain. Catherine leaned forward, her trained ear catching subtle variations in the synthetic voice. Something about the cadence, the choice of words. You will surrender your world's governance to our appointed representatives within one standard rotation of your planet. Resistance is not advised. Previous species who attempted resistance were given object lessons in the futility of defiance. The choice is simple: submission or demonstration. The message repeated every 15 minutes, each time in a different Earth language, but Catherine barely noticed. She was already deep in analysis mode, her software parsing every nuance of the original English transmission. Dr. Morrison. A stern voice interrupted her concentration. She looked up to find 2 military officers in her doorway, their expressions grave. You're needed at the Pentagon. Now. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of military transport flights and security checkpoints. Catherine found herself in a room full of generals, intelligence officials, and politicians, all arguing about humanity's response to the alien ultimatum. We can't simply surrender. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs slammed his fist on the conference table. We have nuclear capabilities, experimental railguns, particle beam research, which would be like throwing rocks at a hurricane. Catherine interrupted, earning glares from around the table. She pulled up her preliminary analysis on the main screen. But that's not what interests me. Look at these patterns in their communication. The room fell silent as she highlighted various aspects of the transmission. Their language choice, their sentence structure. It's revealing something fascinating. They're not just threatening us. They're following a script. A very, very old script. Explain, the President's National Security Advisor demanded, leaning forward. Catherine's eyes lit up with the excitement of discovery. Every aspect of their message is designed to trigger fear and submission, yes, but it's also rigid, formulaic. They're not adapting their approach to us at all. It's as if they've never needed to develop new diplomatic strategies, because this one has always worked. She pulled up more data, her fingers flying across her tablet. And look at these subharmonic frequencies in the transmission. They're carrying emotional markers, probably designed to trigger stress responses in most carbon-based life forms. But here's the thing. Human brains process these frequencies differently than they likely anticipated. We're getting the message, but not the programmed emotional response. The Secretary of Defense frowned. Are you saying they don't understand human psychology? Catherine's smile widened. I'm saying they've never encountered a species that might respond with anything other than fear or aggression. They've never needed to consider alternatives because their playbook has worked perfectly for probably thousands of years. She paused, letting her next words land with full impact. Until now. What are you suggesting, Doctor? The President asked, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. I'm suggesting, Catherine replied, her mind already racing with possibilities, that humanity's greatest weapon against this empire might not be our missiles or bombs, but our ability to give them something they've never encountered before, an entirely different kind of response. Catherine hadn't left her makeshift office in the Pentagon basement for 36 hours. Empty coffee cups littered her desk, and 3 different tablets displayed endless streams of data from the alien transmission. The room's walls were covered with holographic projections showing linguistic patterns, emotional frequency analyses, and cultural comparison models. You should get some rest, James Chen said from the doorway, carrying fresh coffee and a sandwich. The world's not ending for at least another 10 hours. She gave him a tired smile but didn't look up from her work. That's exactly why I can't rest. Look at this. She pointed to a complex pattern of overlapping waveforms. Their message isn't just words. It's carrying layers of meaning we're only beginning to understand. James set down the coffee and leaned in closer. Those subsonic frequencies you mentioned. More than that. Catherine pulled up a new display, showing a 3-dimensional representation of the alien communication structure. Every empire in human history has left linguistic fossils, traces of how they think, how they view themselves and others. The Eternal Empire is no different. They're not just threatening us. They're revealing themselves. Above them, they could hear the distant rumble of military aircraft. The world's powers had mobilized their forces, preparing for what most believed would be a hopeless last stand against an overwhelming alien force. Catherine knew they were missing the point entirely. See these patterns. She highlighted a recurring sequence in the transmission. They repeat their superiority claims exactly 17 times in different ways. Not 16, not 18. Always 17. James frowned. They're 17 systems. Exactly. Catherine's excitement broke through her exhaustion. But why mention that specific number? Why not just say many or all? Because they're obsessed with hierarchy and precise order. Everything has its place in their empire, numbered and ranked. She pulled up historical records of human empires. Look at the difference. Human empires adapted, changed their approaches based on who they were dealing with. The Romans didn't treat the Greeks the same way they treated the Gauls. The British Empire used different strategies in India than they did in Africa. But the Eternal Empire uses exactly the same approach every time. Catherine finished. They've never needed to adapt because their technological superiority was always enough. But that's made them. She searched for the right word. Inflexible, James offered. Vulnerable, Catherine corrected. She stood up, stretching muscles stiff from hours of sitting. They're like a massive tree that's never faced a strong wind. Impressive, powerful, but brittle. A young lieutenant entered the room, tablet in hand. Dr. Morrison, we're picking up new transmissions. The Empire is broadcasting to their own systems about us. Catherine practically pounced on the new data. As she read, her eyes widened. This is perfect. Look how they describe us to their own people. Primitive but potentially useful servants. They're not even considering us as a real threat. Isn't that bad? James asked. It's exactly what we need. Catherine began typing furiously. Their internal communications reveal even more than their threats. They've never faced a species that didn't either submit immediately or try to fight. Their entire social structure, their psychology, their way of thinking, it's all built on this binary response pattern. The lieutenant looked confused. Ma'am, how does this help us? Catherine's smile was almost predatory. Because, Lieutenant, when you've spent thousands of years only dealing with species that either kneel or attack, You lose the ability to handle anything else. The Empire's greatest weakness isn't military, it's conceptual. They literally cannot process a response that doesn't fit their expected patterns. She pulled up a new document and began writing. We're not going to fight them. We're not going to submit. We're going to do something far more devastating to their empire. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. We're going to introduce them to ideas they've never encountered before, concepts their rigid hierarchy can't handle. We're going to give them something their empire has never faced in all its history. What's that? James and the lieutenant asked almost simultaneously. Catherine looked up, her eyes bright with purpose. Choice. Real, actual choice. And the most terrifying thing of all, the possibility that their way isn't the only way to build a civilization. The Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't bother hiding their skepticism as Catherine stood before them in the Pentagon's main conference room. Behind her, a holographic display showed Earth's combined military readiness. Submarines surfacing near strategic points, fighter squadrons maintaining combat air patrols, and space-based weapons platforms moving into position. Let me get this straight, Dr. Morrison, General Roberts said, his voice heavy with disbelief. You want us to respond to their ultimatum with a philosophical discussion. Catherine met his gaze steadily. I want us to respond with the most powerful weapon humans have ever developed, the ability to change the rules of engagement. She gestured to the military display. Everything behind me, all our defenses. They're expecting that. They've seen it all before. Because it's the rational response to a threat. Admiral Chen interrupted. You're asking us to bet 8 billion lives on your theory about their psychology. No, Catherine countered, pulling up her own display. I'm asking you to bet those lives on humanity's greatest strength, our ability to adapt and help others do the same. She highlighted sections of her analysis. Look at their empire's history. 17 systems, 12 species, all conquered the same way. They've never evolved their approach because they've never needed to. The president leaned forward. And you believe this makes them vulnerable. I believe it makes them fundamentally unprepared for us. Catherine brought up a new document, her proposed response. This message introduces concepts their rigid hierarchy has never encountered. Ideas like mutual growth, collaborative advancement, and the strength found in diversity. The Secretary of Defense scoffed. They'll see it as weakness. They'll try to, Catherine agreed, but their own psychology will betray them. Every species they've encountered either fought back or submitted. Their entire empire is built on this binary. When we offer a third option, it won't just surprise them. It'll force them to question their fundamental assumptions about power. She began reading sections of her response aloud. We acknowledge your technological achievements and the scope of your empire. In turn, we invite you to acknowledge something you've never encountered. A species that measures power not by the ability to demand submission, but by the capacity to offer choice. The room fell silent as she continued. Humanity's history is filled with empires that tried to rule through force alone. None survived. Those that endured learned to adapt, to grow, to incorporate new ideas. We offer you not submission, but something far more valuable, the opportunity to evolve beyond the limitations of conquest. General Roberts stood up, his face red. This is madness. They'll laugh at this response. No, Catherine said quietly. They won't. Because buried in this message are linguistic and psychological triggers designed to resonate with their rigid worldview. When they analyze it, and they will, obsessively, they'll find patterns that echo their own communication style, but subtly subvert it. Every phrase is crafted to plant seeds of doubt in their hierarchical certainty. The president's national security advisor spoke for the first time. You're not just responding to their threat. You're trying to destabilize their entire empire. Catherine's smile was grim. Their empire destabilizes itself by being unable to process new ideas. We're just introducing the catalyst. She turned to face the president directly. Every military option ends with Earth either subjugated or destroyed. But this response offers something else: the chance to transform an empire not through force, but through understanding. The room erupted in argument, but Catherine noticed the president studying her message intently. After several minutes, he raised his hand for silence. "Dr. Morrison," he said slowly, "you realize if you're wrong, this response could be seen as mocking them. It could provoke an immediate attack." Catherine nodded. "Yes, Mr. President. But if I'm right, we'll achieve something unprecedented. Victory without a single shot fired, through the power of ideas alone." The president looked around the room, meeting each advisor's eyes before returning to Catherine. "The fate of humanity rests on your understanding of an alien psychology you've only known about for 2 days." "No, sir," Catherine corrected gently. "It rests on something far more reliable: humanity's unique ability to imagine and offer better possibilities than conquest and submission." After what felt like an eternity, the president nodded. "Send the message." The first response from the Eternal Empire came exactly 6 hours after Earth transmitted Catherine's message. It wasn't what anyone expected. Silence. Complete, absolute silence across all channels previously dominated by their threats and demands. Could they be preparing for an attack? General Roberts paced the Pentagon's command center, where Catherine and her team monitored every frequency for signs of Imperial activity. Catherine shook her head, her eyes fixed on the data streams. "No. Look at these readings from our deep space arrays. Their communication networks are lighting up like a Christmas tree, just not to us." She highlighted a complex pattern of transmissions between Imperial worlds. "They're talking to each other. A lot." James Chen burst into the room, his tablet displaying new data. "Kate, you need to see this. Our quantum intercepts just picked up internal communications from their command structure. It's chaos." The screens filled with translated alien transmissions. Catherine's smile grew wider as she read. "Query to High Command. Standard response protocols unclear for current situation. Request immediate clarification. Warning. Subordinate species requesting access to human transmission. Recommend immediate information quarantine. Emergency alert. Command structure Level 3 reporting unprecedented questions from Level 4 administrators. Unable to process using standard hierarchical protocols." Catherine turned to the president's team. "It's working exactly as predicted. Their rigid command structure has no framework for handling our response. Every level of their hierarchy is waiting for instructions from above, but the top levels have no precedent for this situation." The room's main display showed a real-time map of the Empire's known territory, with communication patterns displayed as flowing lines of light. Instead of the usual orderly flow from top to bottom, the patterns had become chaotic, with information moving in all directions. "Look here," Catherine pointed to a cluster of activity. "These are their subordinate species communications. They're not just talking about our message. They're discussing it among themselves. That's never happened before in their history." A lieutenant manning the communication station suddenly straightened. "Dr. Morrison, we're picking up a transmission from... This can't be right. It's from a mid-level Imperial administrator, broadcasting on an open channel." The alien's voice filled the room, its translator struggling to convey the mix of confusion and fascination. "To the humans of Earth, your response requires clarification. You offer neither submission nor resistance. Our protocols do not address this possibility. Request explanation of concept. Collaborative advancement." General Roberts snorted. "They're beginning to crack already." "Not cracking," Catherine corrected. "Learning. Look at this transmission structure. It's coming from Command Level 4, but it's not following their usual communication protocols. This administrator is thinking independently, possibly for the first time." More transmissions began flooding in, each one further evidence of the Empire's growing disruption. Reports of subordinate species requesting copies of Earth's message. Lower-ranking Imperial officials asking unprecedented questions about the nature of authority. Even some of the Empire's client races beginning to communicate directly with each other, bypassing the usual hierarchical channels. Wait, James said suddenly. These patterns, Kate, they're similar to what happened during the fall of the Soviet Union. When rigid systems encounter ideas they can't process, they either adapt or shatter, Catherine finished. She turned to the president's team. Mr. President, I recommend we begin crafting our next response. The Empire's hierarchy is destabilizing faster than even I predicted. We need to guide this transformation before it turns chaotic. The president nodded gravely. What exactly are we looking at, Doctor? Best and worst case scenarios. Catherine gestured to the display of fracturing Imperial communications. Best case. The Empire transforms itself willingly, accepting new ideas about power and cooperation. Worst case. She paused. Their entire system collapses under the weight of questions they've never had to answer before. And that's the worst case. General Roberts asked incredulously. Their empire falling apart. Sounds like a win to me. No, Catherine said softly. Because a collapse that's sudden, across 17 systems and 12 species, could lead to chaos on an unprecedented scale. We don't just want to break their empire, General. We want to help them build something better in its place. The room fell silent as a new transmission appeared. This one from the Imperial High Command itself. Everyone held their breath as the translation appeared on screen. To the humans of Earth, the High Council requests direct communication with the architect of your response. There are questions that require answers. The holographic display in Catherine's new office at the United Nations showed a galaxy in transformation. 12 different alien species, each represented by a distinct color, pulsed with unprecedented activity. Lines of communication crisscrossed between them, bypassing the Empire's traditional channels entirely. The Meridians were the first to understand. Catherine explained to the UN Security Council. They're natural philosophers, forced to suppress their questioning nature under imperial rule. Now they're openly debating the concepts in our message across their entire system. Ambassador Chen, recently appointed as Earth's diplomatic coordinator, studied the display. And the Empire can't stop these discussions. They're trying. Catherine highlighted a series of imperial enforcement actions, but they're facing a weapon they've never encountered before. Ideas that spread faster than their ships can travel. A new alert flashed across the screen. Catherine's eyes widened as she read the incoming transmission. The Kelvin Collective just publicly questioned the Empire's right to rule. They're citing our message about collaborative advancement. The Kelvin Collective, silicon-based beings who served as the Empire's primary engineers, had never before shown signs of resistance. Their defiance sent shockwaves through the imperial hierarchy. Dr. Morrison, the UN Secretary-General, spoke up. The Imperial High Council's invitation to explain our response. Do you believe it's genuine? Catherine pulled up her analysis of the invitation. The language is fascinating. Look at these phrases. Seek understanding. Explore alternatives. Mutual discussion. They're attempting to use our own diplomatic terminology, but the sentence structure reveals their struggle with the concepts. The room's atmosphere tensed as a new transmission appeared. This one from the Nexus Worlds, home to the Empire's most subjugated species. The message was brief but revolutionary. We choose a different path. It's happening even faster than I predicted, Catherine breathed. The subjugated species aren't just questioning the Empire. They are beginning to envision alternatives. They're imagining freedom. Admiral Torres, monitoring the military situation, raised a concern. Could this lead to civil war within the Empire? If these species rise up simultaneously, that's exactly why the next phase is crucial, Catherine interrupted. She pulled up her drafted response to the High Council. We're not trying to destroy the Empire. We're trying to transform it. Look at these emerging communication patterns. The display showed how the various species had begun forming their own diplomatic channels, creating a complex web of dialogue. They're not organizing rebellions, Catherine explained. They're sharing ideas, debating possibilities. The Meridians are discussing philosophy with the Kelvin Collective. The Nexus Worlds are exploring new forms of governance with 3 other species. And the Imperial forces? The Secretary General asked. That's the most fascinating part. Catherine highlighted the Empire's military movements. Their ships are mobilizing, but they're facing a completely new situation. How do you use force against ideas? Every time they crack down in one system, the discussions simply intensify in 3 others. A junior analyst burst into the room. Dr. Morrison. The High Council. They're broadcasting something unprecedented. The main screen filled with the Imperial transmission. The Council's message began traditionally enough, with their usual claims of authority, but then shifted into something entirely new. To all systems under Imperial protection. The High Council acknowledges receipt of multiple requests for clarification regarding human concepts of collaborative advancement. In the interest of maintaining Imperial stability, we have invited their representative to present these ideas directly. All systems are permitted to observe these discussions. The room erupted in murmurs. Permission to observe High Council deliberations was unheard of in Imperial history. Catherine's smile was both triumphant and cautious. They're adapting, not because they want to, but because they're beginning to realize their usual methods won't work against this kind of change. What happens now? Ambassador Chen asked. Catherine gathered her materials, her expression determined. Now I go to the heart of the Empire and show them something they've never seen before. A future where power comes from lifting others up, not holding them down. She paused at the door, looking back at the display of awakening civilizations. The Empire thought they were inviting me to explain our response. Instead, they're about to host the galaxy's first lesson in real democracy. The Imperial transport vessel Eternal Dominion lived up to its grandiose name. Catherine stood at its observation deck, watching Earth shrink into a blue marble behind them. The ship's quantum drive hummed beneath her feet, preparing for its first jump. Quite different from our simulation models, James Chen remarked, joining her at the window. As Earth's leading genotechnologist, he'd been chosen to accompany her along with a small UN delegation. Everything about them is different up close, Catherine replied, studying the ship's interior. Look at these status displays. They're arranged hierarchically, even the maintenance readings. Every piece of information flows up and down their command chain. The ship's first observer, a tall crystalline being named Valseth, approached them with the rigid formality typical of Imperial officials. Honored humans, we prepare for quantum translation. The journey to Imperial Center requires 7 jumps. You will be comfortable. Catherine noted the slight hesitation, the careful choice of words. Very comfortable, first observer. We appreciate the Empire's hospitality. She matched his formal tone, but added a warm smile, a human gesture that always seemed to unsettle Imperial officials. The first jump felt like reality itself hiccuped. When Catherine's vision cleared, Earth's sun had become just another star in the cosmic sea. But she had no time to marvel at the technology. She had work to do. Throughout the journey, Catherine and her team made a point of speaking with every crew member they encountered, regardless of rank. They thanked maintenance workers, asked questions of technical staff, and showed interest in the lives of service drones. Each interaction sent ripples through the ship's rigid social structure. Most peculiar, she overheard one Imperial officer say to another, "They show no regard for proper hierarchical interaction protocols. Perhaps this explains their resistance to Imperial integration," the other replied. "They seem unable to comprehend natural order." Catherine smiled to herself. They were wrong, of course. Humans understood hierarchies perfectly well enough to know they weren't the only way to organize a society. The fourth jump brought them to a system where massive orbital shipyards filled the sky. Countless vessels under construction showed the Empire's industrial might. But Catherine's trained eye noticed something else. The worker species, she whispered to James. Watch how they move. The shipyard's laborers, a silicon-based species known as the Caldrid, worked with incredible efficiency. But their movements had changed from historical records. Where they once worked in perfect mechanical unison, now they showed subtle variations. Individual workers paused to observe different approaches, adapted their techniques. They're innovating, James realized. Your message about collaborative advancement is spreading faster than even I hoped, Catherine finished. The Empire's greatest strength was also its fatal flaw. Their quantum communication network spreads ideas instantly across their entire territory. They never considered what would happen if those ideas challenged their system itself. The final jump brought them to Imperial Center, and Catherine's breath caught in her throat. A star system engineered on a scale that defied comprehension. Dyson rings harvested energy from the central star. Planet-sized habitats housed billions. At the heart of it all hung the Imperial Palace, a structure that would have dwarfed Earth's moon. Behold the eternal glory of the Empire, Val Seth announced proudly. 17 systems, 12 species, 10,000 years of perfect order. Catherine watched a maintenance drone adjust its task sequence to improve efficiency, a small act of independent thinking that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Perhaps, she replied carefully, there are different kinds of glory than eternal sameness. As their ship docked at the palace's main terminal, Catherine received one final transmission from Earth. The president's message was brief. The delegation from the Nexus worlds reports their entire society is watching. The Meridians have prepared philosophical treatises on human concepts of choice. The Kelvin Collective has begun experimenting with collaborative decision-making. Whatever happens in that palace will echo across 17 systems. Catherine straightened her jacket, preparing to disembark. Perfect order is about to meet perfect chaos, she said to her team. Let's go show an empire that the most powerful force in the universe isn't authority. It's the chance to choose something better. The High Council chamber stretched upward into darkness, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 1,000 floating orbs. 9 imperial counselors, each representing different aspects of their civilization, sat on towering platforms arranged in a perfect hierarchy. Catherine stood at the chamber center, a single human figure before the most powerful beings in known space. You stand before the eternal empire. The first counselor's voice resonated through the vast space. Your response to our integration directive has caused disturbances. Explain. Catherine noticed the subtle shifts in the other counselors' postures. They were uncomfortable. The Empire's perfect order was already fraying at the edges. Honored counselors, Catherine began, her voice clear and steady. I stand before you not as a representative of a species seeking integration, but as a messenger of possibility. She gestured to the chamber's walls, where real-time displays showed the Empire's 17 systems. Your civilization has achieved wonders. You've built works that will outlast stars. You've mastered forces that reshape reality itself. But today, I offer you something you've never encountered in 10,000 years of rule. The third counselor leaned forward. What could humans possibly offer the eternal empire? Growth, Catherine replied simply. The word echoed through the chamber. Not the growth of territory or power, but the growth that comes from questioning, from changing, from discovering new ways to exist. She pulled up a holographic display, showing Earth's history. Humanity has built and lost 1,000 empires. Each time we fell, we learned. Each time we rose, we changed. Our strength isn't in maintaining perfect order. It's in our endless capacity to imagine something better. The seventh counselor stirred. Your species speaks of choice, of collaboration. These concepts threaten the very foundation of imperial stability. Do they? Catherine challenged. Or do they offer you the first real change your empire has seen in millennia? She highlighted the recent activities across imperial space. Look at your own systems. The Meridians developing new philosophies. The Kelvin Collective improving efficiency through innovation. The Nexus worlds discovering their voice. The chamber erupted in murmurs as she continued. Your empire is already changing. Every species under your rule is awakening to new possibilities. You can either evolve with them or watch your perfect order shatter under the weight of ideas you can't control. You dare threaten. The second counselor began, but Catherine cut him off. I dare to offer you a choice, she said, her voice growing stronger. For 10,000 years, you've ruled through hierarchy and force. It worked because no one showed you another way. But now your subjects have seen something new. The power of collaborative advancement, the strength found in diversity of thought, the potential of choosing one's own path. Catherine walked the chamber's circumference, meeting each counselor's gaze. You've achieved mastery over quantum mechanics, gravity, space itself. But there's one force you've never learned to harness: the power of willing cooperation. The strength that comes when beings choose to work together rather than submit. She pointed to the real-time displays showing unprecedented cooperation between species across the empire. Your subjects aren't plotting rebellion, they're discovering collaboration. They're not destroying your empire, they're transforming it into something greater. The first counselor raised a hand for silence. You speak of transformation, of choice. What guarantee have we that such change would not lead to chaos? Catherine smiled. The same guarantee that keeps Earth's nations working together despite our differences. The understanding that we achieve more through cooperation than control. I'm not here to dismantle your empire, counselors. I'm here to help you evolve it into something unprecedented. A civilization that draws its strength not from enforced order, but from the combined potential of all its peoples. She spread her hands, encompassing the entire chamber. The universe is vast and largely unknown. Think what your empire could become if instead of demanding submission, you invited innovation. Instead of enforcing silence, you encouraged dialogue. Instead of fearing change, you embraced it. The chamber fell silent as her words hung in the air. Then, slowly, the fourth counselor descended from their platform. An act unprecedented in imperial history. Tell us more, they said simply, about this path you offer. 1 year later, Catherine stood before the newly established Galactic Cooperative Council, housed in what was once the Imperial Palace. The chamber had been transformed. Gone were the towering platforms of hierarchy. Instead, representatives from all species sat in a circular arrangement, symbolizing their equal voice in galactic affairs. The transition exceeded our most optimistic projections, she reported to the assembled delegates. 17 systems, 12 species, all developing their own forms of governance while maintaining peaceful cooperation. The Meridian representative, their crystalline form shimmering with thought lights, spoke first. Our philosophers have spent the year studying human concepts of democracy. We've developed a hybrid system that honors both our traditional meditation circles and Earth's voting processes. The Kelvin Collective has experienced a 300% increase in technological innovation. Their representative added, their silicon-based form pulsing with pride. Freedom to question, to experiment, to collaborate. We never knew we were capable of such advances. Catherine smiled, remembering the Empire's first threatening message to Earth. How different things look now, just 1 year later. The former Imperial military forces had transformed into a peacekeeping fleet, jointly commanded by all member species. The quantum communication network, once used to enforce control, now hosted the largest exchange of ideas in known space. There were challenges, the former First Counselor acknowledged. They now served as one voice among many in the cooperative. Learning to listen rather than command, to suggest rather than order, it required a complete restructuring of our thought patterns. James Chen, now Earth's permanent ambassador to the cooperative, pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy's transformation. Look at these trade routes, he pointed out. New patterns of exchange based on mutual benefit rather than imperial mandate. Cultural exchange programs between species that never previously interacted. Scientific collaborations producing innovations none of us could have achieved alone. The Nexus World's representative, speaking for the formerly most oppressed species, added their perspective. We feared the Empire's collapse would bring chaos. Instead, it brought opportunity. Each world now governs itself, while contributing to the greater whole. Catherine approached the center of the chamber, where a new holographic display showed the hundreds of diplomatic initiatives spawned by her original response to the Empire. The Interstellar Cultural Exchange Program had become the galaxy's most prestigious institution, with species trading not just goods and technology, but ideas and art forms. 1 year ago, she addressed the Council. We proved that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technological superiority or military might. It's the ability to imagine and create something better. The Empire thought they were inviting me here to explain humanity's defiance. Instead, they opened the door to their own evolution. The chamber's displays shifted to show real-time images from across the 17 systems. On countless worlds, beings of different species worked together, studied together, built together. The rigid hierarchies of the past had given way to a flourishing diversity of cultures and governance styles, all linked by their commitment to collaborative advancement. The greatest victory, the former First Counselor observed, wasn't in defeating the Empire. It was in helping us grow beyond it. Catherine nodded. Humanity's gift wasn't in showing you a new way to rule. It was in showing you that there are always more possibilities than conquest or submission. That true power lies not in controlling others, but in helping them reach their full potential. As the council session concluded, Catherine received a message from Earth. The President's words were simple but profound. When they threatened our world, we could have chosen fear or defiance. Instead, we offered them a choice they'd never imagined. In doing so, we didn't just save Earth, we helped transform a galaxy. Catherine looked out at the chamber one last time before departing. Where once there had been perfect, sterile order, now there was beautiful, vibrant complexity. Species that had been enemies under imperial rule now collaborated on grand projects to explore the unknown reaches of space. The Empire had sought to add Earth to its collection of subjugated worlds. Instead, humanity had shown them something far more precious than power, the endless possibilities that arise when beings are free to choose their own path to the stars.